The rain was relentless, a grey curtain that blurred the edges of the world as I stood outside the old Victorian house on Willow Lane. My boots sank into the muddy lawn, and the air smelled of wet earth and forgotten summers. Aunt Clara's house loomed before me, its gabled roof and ivy-choked walls looking more like a relic than a home. She'd passed 3 weeks ago, and the weight of her absence still clung to me, heavier than the damp coat on my shoulders. My name is Ethan Carter, 24, a graphic designer with a penchant for solitude and a life built on predictable lines. But Clara, she'd always been the unpredictable curve, the one who saw colors where I saw shadows. I clutched the brass key the lawyer had mailed me, its edges biting into my palm. Clara's will had been clear. I was to inherit everything. Her house, her savings, her secrets, but only if I honored her final wish. The details were in a letter, sealed in an envelope marked with my name in her looping cursive. I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me didn't want to. Clara had always been eccentric, a painter who lived in a world of her own making, but there was something about this that felt different. Final. Like she'd left me a puzzle I wasn't sure I could solve. Inside the house was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that pierced the heavy drapes. The air smelled of lavender and old books, and every corner held traces of Clara. Her easels, her half-finished canvases, her collection of vintage hats perched on a rack like silent sentinels. I dropped my duffel bag by the door and moved to the living room, where a mahogany desk sat beneath a stained-glass window. The envelope waited there, alone, as if it had been watching for me. My fingers trembled as I broke the wax seal. The letter inside was written on heavy parchment, and Clara's voice seemed to hum through the words. Dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but I'm not done with you yet. You were always my favorite, not because you were my only nephew, but because I saw in you what you've never dared to see in yourself. You've lived safely, my dear, but safety isn't living. I've left you everything. My home, my heart's work, my life savings, but there's a condition. For 1 year, I ask you to live as the person I know you are. Not Ethan, the boy who hides in his sketches, but the soul I glimpsed when you were young, when you laughed at my silly games and wore my old dresses for a lark. Live as her, Ethan. Live as Elise. For 1 year, be my daughter in spirit, and you'll find the truth I've always known. If you refuse, everything goes to charity. Choose wisely, my love. Yours forever, Clara. I read it twice, then a third time, my heart pounding like a drum in a storm. Elise. The name she'd whispered years ago when I was 12, during one of her joke dress-up games. We'd been in her attic, surrounded by trunks of old clothes, and she'd draped a sapphire gown over my skinny frame, laughing as she pinned a wig on my head. Oh, Elise, she'd said, her eyes sparkling. You're too lovely for this world. I'd laughed it off, embarrassed but warm with her affection. It was a game, a fleeting moment. Wasn't it? But now, her words echoed with a weight I couldn't dismiss. Live as Elise. For a year. The idea was absurd, impossible. I was Ethan, lanky, unshaven, comfortable in jeans and hoodies. I wasn't her. Yet the thought of losing Clara's legacy, of letting her down, twisted something deep inside me. She'd always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And there was something else, a flicker of curiosity or maybe fear, that made me wonder what she'd seen in me that I couldn't. The house creaked as if urging me to decide. I wandered upstairs, the letter still in my hand, and found Clara's bedroom. It was like stepping into a painting. Soft pinks, golds and greens, with a vanity covered in perfume bottles and a wardrobe that seemed to hum with secrets. I opened it, half expecting mothballs and dust, but instead found rows of dresses, blouses and skirts, all meticulously preserved. A note pinned to a velvet hanger read, "For Elise." My breath caught. This wasn't a spontaneous whim. Clara had planned this maybe years ago. I reached out, my fingers brushing a silk scarf, and a memory flashed, me as a boy wrapping one of her scarves around my shoulders, twirling as she clapped. I'd felt free then, unjudged. Now the scarf felt like a challenge, daring me to step into a world I didn't understand. I sat on the edge of her bed, the letter crumpled in my fist. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, and the silence of the house pressed against me. I could walk away, let the charity take it all, and go back to my safe, predictable life. Or I could stay. I could try to understand what Clara saw, what she wanted me to become. The choice felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, with no way to see what lay below. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the moon break through the clouds, and thought of Clara's laugh, her unwavering belief in me. By dawn I'd made my decision. To stay. Try. Not because of the money or the house, but because I owed her that much. I owed myself the chance to know what she'd seen. The morning light spilled through the stained glass window, casting kaleidoscope patterns across Clara's bedroom floor. I stood before the open wardrobe, the silk scarf from last night still draped over my shoulder like a hesitant promise. My reflection in the vanity mirror showed a man out of place. Ethan, with his unshaven jaw and tired eyes, staring into a world that felt like it belonged to someone else. Elise. The name hung in the air, both foreign and familiar, like a melody I'd heard once but couldn't quite hum. Clara's letter lay on the vanity, its words etched into my mind. Live as her, Ethan. Live as Elise. I decided to stay to try, but now the reality of that choice loomed like a mountain I had no map to climb. A year. A year of living as a woman. Clara's vision of me. The thought sent a shiver through me, not entirely fear, but something sharper, like the edge of a secret I wasn't ready to uncover. I wasn't naive. I knew this wouldn't just be about clothes or names. It was about stepping into a life I'd never imagined, one that would demand I rewrite pieces of myself. And yet, Clara's belief in me, her unshakable certainty, tugged at something deep, urging me to take the first step. I started small, practical. If I was going to do this, I needed to understand what living as Elise meant. The wardrobe was a labyrinth of textures, velvet, chiffon, lace, and I hesitated before pulling out a simple navy dress, its lines clean but unmistakably feminine. My hands shook as I held it up, the fabric whispering against my fingers. Could I do this? Wear it? Be her? I laid the dress on the bed and turned to the vanity, where a small wooden box caught my eye. Inside was a collection of makeup, lipsticks, powders, brushes, all pristine as if Clara had curated them for this moment. Another note, tucked beneath a tube of mascara. Start here, Elise. Trust yourself. The mirror became my battlefield. I shaved carefully, closer than I ever had, my skin tingling under the unfamiliar smoothness. I fumbled with the makeup, guided only by vague memories of watching Clara apply her own. Foundation first, cool against my skin, then a tentative swipe of eyeliner that smudged until I got it right. Each step felt like a negotiation with myself, Ethan arguing with Elise, logic wrestling with instinct. When I brushed on mascara, my lashes darkened, and the face in the mirror shifted, just a fraction, into something softer, less certain. The dress was next. I slipped it on, the fabric gliding over my skin like water, and stood frozen, caught between absurdity and awe. It fit. Too well, as if Clara had measured me in secret. The hem brushed my knees, and the sleeves hugged my arms, transforming my silhouette into something I didn't recognize. I tied my shoulder-length hair back with the silk scarf, and for a moment I saw her, Elise, peering back at me. Not a woman, not yet, but not quite Ethan either. A stranger in my own skin. The house felt different as I moved through it, the dress rustling with each step. I expected to feel ridiculous, like a child playing pretend, but instead there was a quiet thrill, a sense of stepping into a story Clara had written just for me. Downstairs, I found a leather-bound journal on the kitchen table, another of Clara's surprises. The first page read, Elise's year. Write it. Live it. I sat, pen in hand, and wrote my first entry. Day 1. I don't know who I am yet, but I'm here. For you, Clara. The practical challenges hit by noon. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss, reminding me of a project deadline. I worked remotely so I could stay here, but how would I explain this? I couldn't exactly Zoom as Elise without questions I wasn't ready to answer. And the outside world. Willow Lane was a small town, its streets lined with curious eyes. Clara had been a beloved oddity, but I was an outsider now, a man in a dress, or worse, a man trying to be something else. The thought of stepping outside made my stomach lurch. I needed help. Clara's journal mentioned a name. Miriam, her old friend, a seamstress who lived 3 streets over. She knows, the note said. Trust her. I hesitated, then grabbed a coat from Clara's closet, long enough to cover the dress, and slipped on a pair of her flats. They pinched, but they fit. The walk to Miriam's was a gauntlet of nerves, the drizzle soaking my coat as I kept my head down, avoiding the gaze of a passing dog walker. What was I doing? This wasn't a game anymore. Miriam's house was a cottage, warm light spilling from its windows. She answered the door before I could knock, a woman in her 60s with sharp green eyes and a knowing smile. "Elise," she said, not a question but a greeting, as if she'd been expecting me. My throat tightened. "Ethan," I corrected, but my voice wavered. She waved me inside, her home smelling of cinnamon and thread. "Clara told me you'd come," she said, pouring tea. "She saw you, you know. The real you. This year it's not about pretending. It's about finding her." I wanted to argue, to say I was just honoring a wish, but Miriam's gaze held me like a spotlight. She handed me a small bag, tights, a wig, a few accessories, and a handwritten guide on blending in. "Start slow," she said. "But don't hide." Clara didn't. I left her cottage dazed, the bag heavy in my hands, her words heavier in my heart. Back at Clara's, I stood before the mirror again, the wig, a soft auburn bob, transforming me further. Elise was taking shape, and with every change, Ethan felt a little further away. That night I dreamed of Clara. She was painting, her brushstrokes bold, and she turned to me, her eyes bright. "You're braver than you think, Elise," she said. I woke with a start, the name echoing in the dark. The challenge wasn't just the clothes or the name. It was the courage to let go of who I thought I was. And I wasn't sure I had it. The morning sun filtered through Clara's lace curtains, painting the kitchen in soft golds. I stood at the counter, stirring sugar into a chipped teacup, the auburn wig framing my face like a borrowed crown. It had been a week since I'd met Miriam, a week since I'd first written Elise in Clara's journal. The navy dress had been joined by others, a floral skirt, a cream blouse, each chosen with Miriam's guidance, each a step further from Ethan. The mirror no longer startled me, but it didn't feel like home either. Elise was still a stranger, one I was learning to wear like a second skin. Adapting to this life was like learning a new language, one spoken in gestures and glances. Mornings began with rituals. Shaving, makeup, choosing an outfit. Miriam had taught me the basics. How to blend foundation, how to walk in low heels without wobbling, but it was the subtleties that tripped me up. The way a skirt swayed when I moved, the weight of earrings tugging at my ears, the softness of my own voice when I practiced speaking as Elise. I'd recorded myself reading Clara's letter aloud, pitching my voice higher, softer, until it sounded less like a parody. Each time I felt a pang of something, shame maybe, or exhilaration. Work was my first real test. I'd emailed my boss, claiming a personal project that required me to stay in Willow Lane for the year. Remote work was a blessing, but Zoom calls were a minefield. I kept my camera off, citing technical issues, but my voice betrayed me. "You sound different, Ethan," my colleague Sarah said during a meeting, her tone curious. I mumbled about a cold, my heart racing as I adjusted the wig out of sight. Clara's journal became my refuge, where I confessed. Day 8. I'm lying to everyone, including myself. But when I'm Elise, I feel alive. The outside world was harder. Willow Lane was small, its residents a mix of nosy and kind. I'd ventured out twice, once to the grocery store, once to the post office, wearing Miriam's suggested simple look. A sweater, jeans tailored for women, and the wig. I kept my head down, but eyes followed. A cashier squinted at me. A neighbor paused mid-wave. Were they seeing Elise, or Ethan in disguise? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but Miriam's words echoed. Don't hide. Clara didn't, so I didn't. I smiled, nodded, let them wonder. Miriam became my anchor. Her cottage was a safe haven where she adjusted hems, taught me posture, and shared stories of Clara's youth. How she'd defied convention, painting murals in a man's world, wearing whatever she pleased. "She saw that fire in you," Miriam said one afternoon, pinning a skirt to fit my frame. "Elise isn't a mask, love. She's you unshackled." I wanted to believe her, but doubt clung like damp air. Was I honoring Clara or losing myself? The house itself seemed to guide me. I found more of Clara's notes, tucked in books taped to mirrors, each a breadcrumb on this strange path. One inside a cookbook read, "Elise, cook something bold. Live boldly." So I did. I made her favorite lemon tart, the kitchen filling with citrus and memory. As I licked batter from my fingers, I laughed, and the sound was lighter, freer. Elise's laugh startled me how natural it felt. But adaptation wasn't just clothes or recipes. It was the world's reaction. At the library, picking up books Clara had reserved, the librarian, a wiry man named Tom, stared too long. "You're Clara's nephew, right?" he asked, his eyes flicking to my scarf, my polished nails. I nodded, heart pounding. "You look different." He didn't pry, but the air crackled with unspoken questions. I left with the books and a tightness in my chest, wondering how long I could straddle this line between Ethan and Elise. Nights were the hardest. Alone, I'd sit by Clara's easel, sketching as Elise. My lines were softer, more fluid, like her dresses. One night I painted, a clumsy attempt at a self-portrait, my face caught between two worlds. The journal entry that followed was raw. Day 14. "I'm starting to like her, Elise. But what does that mean for me?" The question lingered, unanswered, as I fell asleep to the sound of rain. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, addressed to Elise Carter. My breath caught. Clara must have told someone. Inside was an invitation to a local art gallery's memorial exhibit for Clara, with a note. "Elise, your aunt wanted you to attend as her legacy. Come as you are." No signature, but the handwriting was Miriam's. My stomach twisted. Public event. Dozens of people, all expecting what? Clara's daughter. Her nephew. Me. I stood before the wardrobe, the invitation in hand, and felt the weight of the challenge shift. This wasn't just about living as Elise in private. It was about stepping into her world, her truth in front of others. The thought was terrifying, but beneath it, a spark of something else flickered. Curiosity, defiance, maybe even pride. I chose a green dress, elegant but understated, and practiced walking in heels until my ankles ached. Miriam would help with the rest. As I wrote in the journal that night, Day 16, "I'm scared but I'm going." For Clara. For Elise. I realized adaptation wasn't just surviving as her. It was starting to feel like becoming her. The gallery was alive with murmurs and the clink of wine glasses, its walls adorned with Clara's paintings, vibrant swirls of color that seemed to pulse under the soft lighting. I stood at the entrance, the green dress clinging to me like a second skin, its emerald sheen catching the light. Miriam had worked her magic. The auburn wig was styled in loose waves, my makeup subtle but striking, and the heels, though still a challenge, gave me a grace I hadn't known I could muster. I was Elise, or at least the closest I'd come to her in the 3 weeks since I'd opened Clara's letter. But standing there with Willow Lane's art crowd milling about, I felt like a tightrope walker, one misstep from falling. Miriam squeezed my arm, her eyes warm but firm. "You're ready, Elise. Clara's watching." She'd driven me here, her presence a lifeline in this sea of strangers. The invitation, addressed to Elise Carter, burned in my mind. Someone, Miriam or perhaps Clara herself through some prescient act, had set this stage, and I was the performer. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of perfume and anticipation, and stepped inside. Heads turned, but not with the scrutiny I'd feared. A few smiles, a nod from an older woman in a shawl, a curious glance from a man with a sketchpad. I wasn't Ethan in a dress, not here. I was Elise, Clara's legacy, and the realization hit like a wave, gentle but overwhelming. I moved through the crowd, Miriam at my side, and found myself drawn to a painting in the corner. A girl in a sapphire dress, twirling in a field of stars. My breath caught. It was me, from that long-ago summer when Clara had dressed me up and called me Elise. She'd painted it, preserved it, as if she'd known this day would come. A woman approached, her silver hair pinned elegantly, her eyes sharp with recognition. "You must be Elise," she said, her voice warm but probing. "I'm Helen, the gallery curator. Clara spoke of you often." My heart stuttered. Spoke of me. As Elise. I managed a nod, my voice catching as I said, "She was special to me." Helen's smile deepened. "She said you were her daughter in spirit. This exhibit, it's as much yours as hers." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through me. Daughter in spirit. I glanced at Miriam, who nodded almost imperceptibly, and felt something shift inside. Not just obligation, not just curiosity. This was something deeper, a truth Clara had seen and was now unfolding in me. I wandered the gallery, each painting a piece of Clara's soul, and found another note tucked behind a frame. "Elise, you're here because you're brave. Feel it." My eyes stung, and I blinked back tears, aware of the crowd but suddenly uncaring. This wasn't about them. It was about Clara, about me. A man's voice broke my reverie. "Beautiful work, isn't it?" I turned to find Tom, the librarian. His eyes kinder than they'd been at the library. "You're Clara's niece?" he asked, and I nodded, my voice steadier now. "Something like that." He didn't press, just smiled and moved on, but the interaction left me trembling. Not with fear, but with a strange, budding confidence. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was Elise, and for the first time that felt like enough. Miriam guided me to a small stage where Helen was speaking. Her words painting Clara as a visionary, a woman who lived unapologetically. "And tonight," Helen said, "we honor her through Elise Carter, who carries her spirit forward." The crowd turned, and I froze, my pulse a drumbeat. Miriam whispered, "Speak. Tell them who you are." I stepped forward, the heels clicking softly, and faced the sea of faces. "I'm Elise," I said, my voice clear, higher than Ethan's but not forced. "Clara saw something in me I'm only beginning to understand. She taught me to live boldly, to paint my own truth. I'm here to honor that." The words flowed, unscripted, and the applause that followed was warm, genuine. I stepped down, my legs shaking, and Miriam hugged me. "That's her," she whispered. "That's Elise." Back at Clara's house, I sat at her easel, the journal open before me. Day 21. I felt her tonight, me Elise. Not a role, but a part of me I didn't know was there. The green dress hung on the wardrobe door, no longer a costume but a choice. I painted again, my brushstrokes bolder, and saw Clara's smile in my mind. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known that Elise wasn't just a game, but a truth waiting to be claimed. Yet questions lingered, sharp and insistent. Who was I becoming? Was Ethan fading, or was he part of Elise too? The gallery had awakened something, a spark of self I couldn't ignore, but it also left me raw, exposed. Clara's vision was clear, but mine was still forming, and the year stretched ahead, full of unknowns. Below is part 5. The realization of truth. The final phase of the immersive script for Mom's joke made me her daughter forever. Crossdressing stories. This phase brings Ethan/Elise's year-long journey to a close, culminating in profound revelations about their identity and Clara's intentions. The tone remains reflective and suspenseful, weaving together emotional clarity, suspenseful discoveries, and a heartfelt resolution. I'll aim for approximately 5,000 characters to align with a 25,000 character goal for the full story, maintaining the continuous narrative flow. The seasons had turned, and Clara's house no longer felt like a museum of her life, but a home I'd claimed as Elise. It was day 364, the eve of the year's end, and I stood in her garden, the late autumn air crisp against my skin. I wore a burgundy sweater dress, one of Miriam's creations, its soft wool hugging me like an embrace. The auburn wig was gone, my own hair, grown out and styled, framed my face. Elise wasn't a costume anymore. She was me, or at least a part of me I'd come to love. But as the deadline of Clara's wish loomed, questions swirled like the leaves at my feet. Who was I now? And what had Clara meant for me to find? Past year had reshaped me. I'd navigated Willow Lane as Elise, my initial fear of judgment giving way to quiet confidence. The townsfolk had accepted me, some with curiosity, others with warmth. Sarah, my colleague, had met me for coffee during a visit, her eyes widening at my transformation but her smile genuine. "You seem happier," she'd said, and I was. Work calls were now done with the camera on, my voice steady as Elise. Clara's journal was nearly full, its pages a map of my journey. Sketches, confessions, moments of joy and doubt. Day 200. I laughed today, and it was mine, not borrowed. Day 300. Ethan feels like a memory, but I don't miss him as much as I thought I would. Yet the mystery of Clara's wish lingered. Her notes, scattered like treasures throughout the house, had guided me. "Be bold, Elise. Trust your heart." But I sensed there was more, a final piece waiting to be uncovered. That morning I'd found a locked box in the attic, hidden beneath a pile of old canvases. Its brass clasp was engraved with EC, and my pulse quickened. Ethan Carter. Elise Carter. I'd carried it to the living room, where it now sat on the coffee table, a silent challenge. Miriam arrived at noon, her eyes gleaming with something like pride. "You've done it, love," she said, sipping tea. Clara would be dancing. I smiled, but my gaze drifted to the box. "There's something I need to know," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "Why, Elise? Why me?" Miriam's smile softened. "Open it. She left it for you." The key was taped inside the journal's back cover, another of Clara's secrets. My hands trembled as I unlocked the box, revealing a bundle of letters, a small velvet pouch, and a photograph. The photo showed me at 12 in that sapphire dress, laughing as Clara pinned a flower in my hair. My chest tightened. She'd kept it all these years. The letters were addressed to Elise, written over decades, some dated before I was born. I read the first, my breath shallow. "Dear Elise, you're not here yet, but I know you will be. My sister's boy, my Ethan, carries a light I see even now. One day you'll shine as Elise, not because I say so, but because it's who you are. I'll guide you, even when I'm gone." The words blurred as tears fell. Clara had seen me, not just the boy I was, but the person I could be. The other letters chronicled her own life, her struggles as an artist, her defiance of norms, her love for me. One, dated a year before her death, read, "I'm leaving you my world, Elise. Live in it. Be free." The velvet pouch held a locket, engraved with EC, containing a tiny painting of a star. I clasped it around my neck, its weight grounding me. The truth hit like sunlight through clouds. Clara's wish wasn't about changing me. It was about freeing me. Elise wasn't a role to play for a year. She was a part of me, always there, waiting for permission to exist. Ethan wasn't gone. He was still in my sketches, my quiet moments, but Elise was the truth Clara had seen, the self I'd been afraid to claim. I wasn't just honoring her wish. I was living it. I wrote the final journal entry, my hand steady. Day 365. I'm Elise, and I'm Ethan, and I'm whole. Thank you, Clara, for seeing me first. The house felt alive, as if Clara's laughter echoed in its walls. I stepped outside, the locket warm against my skin, and faced the town as Elise, not for a year, but for as long as I chose. The next morning I met Miriam at the gallery, where Clara's paintings still hung. Helen greeted me, her eyes kind. "What now, Elise?" she asked. I smiled, no longer afraid. "I live," I said, "as me." And in that moment I knew Clara's joke, calling me Elise all those years ago, had never been a joke at all. It was a gift, a map to my truth, and I'd carry it forever.